very brief introduction. This will be quite informal. We will have, we do have a quorum, but we do expect a few additional commissioners here who, due to the unusually early hour, are have to drop off their kids at school. So, and I think the purpose really of this special review session was to introduce Commissioner Tom Finkelpearl, the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs, to give an overview of the Theater Sub-District Council and its philosophy and its grants and what it's been doing and what it's he anticipates it will be doing in the future. As all of you know, we recently both changed the fee structure and contribution structure regarding contributions to the Theater Sub-District Council that is now before the City Council, and also somewhat revised the charter for the Theater Sub-District Council, at least as contained in the zoning resolution. So we're going to do this on a very informal basis. Tom, do you know everyone here, or do you want them to introduce themselves?
No, I have some people I know quite well.
Unusually and unprecedentedly, I think we'll have our commissioners introduce themselves.
Great, thank you.
I don't think we've ever done that before, as far as I know. So we'll start.
Commissioner to commissioner, right?
Good morning, Commissioner Londonberry. Nice to meet you.
Anna Levin. I'm Cheryl Efron.
Ken Knuckles.
And Carl Weisbrod and
Joseph Dweck, and I happen to be the funniest commissioner of all of them.
All right.
For the record.
Mentioning and demonstrating simultaneously.
I will simply note that all they did was give their names, which you could read. So this is not exactly an illuminating introduction on their part, but I think they're speaking collectively for all of us. I think we're all interested in hearing from you. So,
okay,
and
great.
We'll have a few people who will come in over the next 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Tom Finkelpearl. I'm the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs. I want to thank Carl for all his amazing work and partnership on this. So I think you know this, but the Theater Sub-District Council is a not-for-profit corporation established pursuant to a 1998 zoning regulation that allows owners of certain Broadway theaters to transfer air rights within the theater sub-district, provided the theaters are preserved. There are commitments to use the preserved space for legitimate theater use. Interesting that that had to be in the regulation at the time. And funds are deposited into the theater sub-district fund. So I am, to introduce the Department of Cultural Affairs, I'm not sure it has to be introduced, but we are the largest local funding agency for the arts in the United States of America by far. After the federal government, we're the biggest funder. Actually, San Francisco spends more money per person based on a hotel tax. So I sort of like being number 2 per capita because it's not as much. So, but we have a very large agency by American standards, and we actually do a lot to support the theater. So we are the landlord for the Metropolitan Museum, the zoos, the gardens, the natural history. We also give tens of millions of dollars of grants competitively awarded, many to the theater community. So over 300 theaters we support. I think it's over about 10 million. We estimated this at about $10 million of support for the theater, for the nonprofit theater. So obviously this is what I just said. The idea of the Theater Sub-District Fund is to enhance long-term viability of Broadway, to facilitate the production of new theater work, and to develop new audiences. So the members of the Theater Sub-District Council are, I am representing the mayor, Melissa Mark Viverito, her deputy speaker was there. Gail Brewer actually came to some of the meetings this year. Carl Weisbrod was represented, and then we had a fantastic group of experts. People may have heard of Lin-Manuel Miranda. That was awesome. He came to the meetings, participated fully, even stayed late, read everything. That was pretty great. very busy guy. So we have, George Wolfe, multiple award-winning producer and director. Paige and Daryl both have, extensive experience.
Can we ask questions in between? or-
Yeah, sure.
So the speaker is ex officio, or she actually?
No, these are the members, the voting members.
Right, but she comes to the meetings, sends an ex officio, or?
She sent a representative. So the speaker did not come, the borough president did come.
Right.
So yes. So this is the district. And obviously, I don't think I have to convince you of the importance of this part of the city. It is a nucleus of the theatrical activity. There's an incredible vibrancy there in terms of economic benefit to the city. And, the role of that district in terms of the international reputation of New York City in terms of drawing tourists. When NYC and company goes off to represent the cultural activity in New York City, it's almost always a Broadway rep from the theater sub-district. So again, there are all kinds of great statistics about the importance, $12.57 billion of economic activity, according to the Broadway League, 89,000 jobs. And obviously, this was an incredible year for the activities of that particular part of town, for the theater, for Broadway. Record ticket sales. So I think it's important to note.
Tom, could I just
Yes.
ask a quick
Yes,
question?
sure.
On the 12.5 billion,
Mhm.
that's obviously based on ticket sales plus ancillary spending? Is that
Yeah.
how you compute that?
Yeah, so actually, that's not our statistic, that's the Broadway League. But the way these things are there's ticket sales, there's hotels, but then there's like the secondary effects are the dry cleaners. If you have a certain number of jobs, the 89,000 jobs, is direct and indirect, right? So that's, those calculations are based on the ripple effect into the economy of the district. Hello. So I think what's important to say also is that theater, there's an ecosystem. It's not just what happens in the district. And you'll see when I get to the stats that 6 of the grantees this year were actually in the district and 5 were outside the district. But if you look at the way theater works in New York City and the way all of the arts work is that there's a total ecosystem that's a nonprofit and the for-profit sector combined. When I was a young man in 1979, I moved to New York City. I was an artist. I didn't move to New York City to participate in the for-profit or the nonprofit arts world. I wanted to have a gallery. I wanted to, show at museums. None of that really happened, I have to say, which is why I'm here as commissioner today. But the idea, again, for theater is quite similar. My deputy commissioner, Kristen Sakota, performed both in Urban Bushwomen, but also, it was a nonprofit, but also in the for-profit Broadway sector. So it's interconnected intimately, and I think that's extremely important to recognize. So you think of something like Hamilton, which started at one of the nonprofit theaters that we support, the Public Theater, and moved to Broadway. A lot of the great productions, you think of Chorus Line, Rent, these are plays that are musicals that started in the nonprofit outside of the theater sub-district, but where would we be without all those amazing productions today? So we have had 4 grant cycles before. I'm going to get to our current grant cycle. 5.7 million has been distributed, 37 grants to 25 groups. These are the years starting in 2010 up through this current year. Here's where the grants went. They went to support audience development, enhance educational programming. There were grants for new theatrical presentations, and there were grants to support management. So here are some stats. 266,000 tickets were distributed, 62,000 students engaged in arts education, 36 new productions, and 75 workshops and readings.
Can we cut in with questions at all?
Yeah, sure.
So the 266,000 tickets distributed, is it school children? Is it?
So actually, I should ask Barbara for a little bit more background on that. These are the statistics that are based on an analysis. So would you like to comment first? So by the way, if Barbara, if I could introduce, why don't you, I'd like to introduce who she is. So the Theater Sub-District Council is actually a nonprofit organization.
Right.
And the executive director actually is Kristen Secoto, my deputy commissioner. And the way that it's run is that we hire a consultant, which is Barbara, who's been here for all of this, for all of the rounds. And so she's the one with the actual depth of knowledge about the previous. I can talk a lot about what happened since I became commissioner. So Barbara, would you like to?
266,000 plus tickets is a combination. A lot of it is school children, some of it is community groups, some of it are ticket sales sold at a discount, discounted programs, new productions that were supported through the Theater Sub-District Council grants. So that's a number that includes all of those different activities.
Is there a preference for New York City residents or children to, expose them to the theater and to culture?
All of the education programs have been in New York City schools, and I think public schools, all of them.
Thanks, Barbara.
So actually, can I just ask Barbara, how does that work? The theater district sub-council, sub-district fund gives or pays for tickets, or?
It's in their grant expense. It's in their grant. We make the grant to the organization purchases discounted tickets. In other cases, we have funded productions, and those productions sold tickets to the play itself. So it's a combination, Carl.
Okay. So I also wanted
I'm
to
sorry,
say.
could you just go back one second? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So, let's say you fund a community organization that wants its participants or children in the neighborhood to attend theater, and they buy tickets to whatever, Broadway show or off-Broadway show. Is that conditioned on the Broadway show or off-Broadway show giving a discount to that organization?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Broadway League does family first nights. The families spend $5 a ticket to come to the show. The theater buys a ticket at a greatly reduced rate.
But that's a condition of the grant, presumably, that, in other words, that.
They couldn't do the grant if they were paying full.
Got it, okay.
I have a
Also,
question.
just say, oh, go, yes.
To the other part of that, if you fund a local community group to produce a play and put it on, are the tickets that people pay full price for, whether they're much less expensive than if it were in a for-profit theater in Manhattan, is that included in that 266,000?
It is, but what we have funded has been tickets that were sold full price because it's a reduced program for $20 or $25. We've not funded anything that was at what we would see as a full Broadway price.
I see. So all of your production
Everything
grants
is in there.
include the ticket sales for those productions in that number?
Correct.
And I'll say that one of the public works at the Public Theater produced Winter's Tale, got a big grant from Theater Sub-District Council, which was free Shakespeare in the Park. So those are actually free tickets. Produced this incredible, I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was an amazing reinterpretation of a great Shakespeare play with huge input from community theaters all over the city. There was a core group of 5 professional actors, and then it just rolled out. The Muppets were in it. It was unbelievable. It was great Shakespeare and amazing audiences and incredible participation by people from all over the city. So that was another grantee.
I have one other question
Yes.
about that. Do you encourage other foundations working with the arts to leverage your productions and co-invest or co-grant with you?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't necessarily do it directly ourselves, but the grant recipients use the Theater Sub-District Council Fund as leverage for other foundations and corporations, and there is a tremendous amount of that goes on. We don't necessarily fund 100% of a program.
And I'll give an example of that this year. I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but a coalition or cohort in Brooklyn at BRIC, Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Art, and Tafana put together a program which was multiply funded by the State Council, by us. There are 3 different funders. It's fully funded now, but each of the grants leverages the other grant, and it's a fantastic training program. I'll get to that in a minute, because that's part of this year's. But again, that idea that, that this is a spectrum, it's an ecosystem. One of our staff members looked at the Tony Award nominations last year and saw that 51 of the nominees originated or were presented by organizations funded by the Cultural Affairs Department. So nonprofit theater was funneling talent into Broadway, and 3 out of the 4 of the nominees of Best Play had come through the nonprofit sector. So I just want to say that it's important to look at. There's money going directly into, the majority of the grantees were in the district, but those ones outside the district are extremely important as well. Okay. Okay. So this year, now we're getting to the part where I actually know more about what happened. Grant 5, we awarded $2,232,100, and this was to increase diversity and access to professional positions in the theater workforce. So these are a range of paid fellowships, mentorships, professional training, career development. So this brings our total grants up to about $8 million. The Department of Cultural Affairs, oh, and here's the list, and you can see that 6 out of those are within the theater subdistrict, and 5 are outside. We commissioned a study earlier this year in which the grantees of our the Department of Cultural Affairs, which is the nonprofit sector, looked at the jobs. This is not the artists on stage. These are the jobs in the cultural sector. And so we actually got information on 37,000 staff members and another 11,000 board members. And actually there were some high, positive things. That the workforce in the cultural sector in New York is actually quite a bit more diverse than national averages. It's actually quite a bit less diverse than the city itself. And unfortunately, we found that the jobs in theater were there's less diversity than in other sectors. So if you look at what happened on stage last year, it was fantastic. It really was. It represented New York. We had amazing diversity in the performers, but that wasn't really necessarily the case in the behind-the-scenes jobs. So 70% of the employees in the cultural sector identified as white, non-Hispanic, and only 35% of the technical production staff identified as female. So there are certain parts of the theater industry that are not very diverse, and there are certain, for example, some of the unions are extremely male-dominated. We're very happy, by the way, to see, for example, with Roundabout, I don't know if anybody saw the NBC story on that, working with IATSE, which is the stagehands. The door is open. I really think that that's true. A lot of these folks got the job, they got the job from their father. I was talking to one of the heads of IATSE, and they really feel like it's time to open the door for women and for a more diverse workforce on those. Those are good jobs. Those are jobs that pay often, over $100,000. They're exciting, they're fun, they're interesting, they're, physically taxing. But we need the best and the brightest from the entire spectrum of New York City. And that's why this round focused on diversity. So all kinds of diversity training. There is apprenticeship programs, the theater breaking through barriers. There's a lot of people with disabilities who have talents that could be utilized in the theater, which are going untapped. And so anyway, so that there is this variety. Most of these programs they're all paid positions for a diverse workforce. So the outcomes, we think that the best and the strongest theater district is going to be one that's supported by these kind of grants, but also that reflects the diversity and uses all the talents of New York City. So this is, enriching a talent pipeline and workforce diversity of the theater community, we think will make the whole district stronger. And I have to say that while it was great to have a couple of $1 million of funding to do this, we started with 90 or so over around 90 applications. There was a panel that cut it down to, second round? 22, right. So there were at least 20, 21, 22 organizations that had fantastic applications that would have been fundable. We had to cut it down to the amount of money we had. We felt that there was tremendous need for more funding than is currently available under this funding formula. Look, it's fine to have, look, we had a great year on Broadway last year with the highest attendance. Tourism is at an all-time high in New York City. But if you don't continue to invest in research and development, you continue to invest in the things like the future is diversity, the future is, you know, like the people we saw on stage, that needs to be the entire theater community. So we feel, you know, strongly that if there's more funding available within Theater Subdistrict Council funding mechanism, there are going to be great initiatives to help, you know, build the theater community into an even stronger part of the economy. And I'll just say one other thing, which is, and then I'm happy to discuss. I taught a course recently, a couple of years ago, before I was commissioner, to students from NYU Abu Dhabi. NYU Abu Dhabi is, you know, unfolding in a place where they're building the Louvre and, you know, the National Gallery, you know, and this and that. But they don't have the little arts organizations. They don't have the infrastructure of artists. They don't have the ecosystem that we have in the United States. So this course was taught here in New York, and we went on a field, it was a 3-week course. Every day we went on a field trip. And we went to artist communities. You know, we met tiny, you know, arts organizations, tiny theater, whatever. And we went to the Met, and we went to, you know, BAM, or, yeah, we went to BAM. The idea being that you can't have a vibrant arts sector without an entire arts sector that's healthy from top to bottom. We're having issues right now in New York City. It's becoming very expensive. I don't have to tell you guys that. And you know, we believe that people are still streaming into New York City at great numbers, but if we don't do something about the entire ecosystem and keep the ecosystem healthy, we could lose our status as the preeminent arts city, at least in the United States and probably in the world. So that's what Theater Subdistrict Council has been doing, is pumping money into the entire ecosystem, doing stuff that's very valuable for the Theater Subdistrict itself. So that's my presentation.
Questions for Tom? Carol?
Yes.
I'm going to keep this on a very informal basis. So
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm still using my microphone, though.
Yes.
Feels like
Yeah, that's
what
fine.
we do.
This is
I
public.
think you have a very sympathetic audience to the importance of
Yep.
having a diverse and vibrant arts community in New York. My question is really one about budget. How do you ensure that the theater subdistrict income, which will grow as the city grows, is additive to the budget and isn't really just subsidizing what would have been arts or cultural affairs money?
Oh, so I mean, this is completely separate from our budget. There's no consideration in the budget process. And by the way, we added $10 million to our budget this year. The mayor added that money. The council also added $10 million. So we had $20 million more. The need in the, so we're not saying, oh, don't worry about it, we have this Theater Subdistrict Council funding. This is additional funding for particular initiatives that relate to theater only in that, and that relate back to the Theater Subdistrict. So I don't think there's any way, by the way, many of these groups, if not all of them, I think all of them are already grantees from us, all the nonprofit, yes? Yeah, right, that's a good point. So actually, this is the one time where we could fund the for-profit industry. And of course, ATSI being, for example, a good partner with the Roundabout Theater, we don't fund unions, right? We fund nonprofit theaters. So first of all, there's the opportunity to fund organizations we wouldn't otherwise fund. But yeah, we didn't say with BRIC, you know, we're going to, you know, lower your funding at the same time you're starting this training program with the theaters, local theaters. So it's absolutely additional funding. That's always been that way, and it will continue to be that way.
Michelle?
Hi, sorry to miss the very beginning. I just, you brought up unions, and so I'm wondering, maybe it's especially in response to the notice of funding from the fund, do you see it as part of your mission or work to work with the unions on the workforce side of things to diversify things?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think we all know that a lot of the unions aren't very diverse. I think again, having met with some union reps, it seems like the openness is absolutely there. And I think, both gender diversity and sense of diversity, it's time. We need the most talented people available and just opening the doors. So it wasn't explicitly stated in the RFP that we're looking for union participation, but sure, it's great.
I raise it, my organization also has a workforce arm that specifically trains people in the TV and film industry that's been extremely successful in helping diversify that industry, and quite honestly, leveraging the city tax credit that is available, where that aligns very nicely, I think, with administration and, quite honestly, council goals for that industry. And there's a lot of crossover, in terms of some of the unions. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for the administration to play a role in convening people and thinking through things around that end.
Yeah, and we've been working, I think, more closely with the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment than in the past. And part of it is we're doing a cultural plan for the city, which is due on June 30th. So again, it's the whole thing. It's not a cultural plan for the Department of Cultural Affairs. It's a cultural plan for the city, which is then for-profit and nonprofit and all.
And if I may, the point you made about the ecosystem, I think, is critically important. And and maybe I missed this. Is the department also looking at the total number of square feet that are being used by cultural institutions, for-profit, nonprofit, when leases are expiring, how much people are paying per square foot, what the average cost of living is for an artist? To me, is that part of the cultural plan in thinking about things?
So we haven't done an analysis of square footage, but absolutely. So for example, there's an initiative called Affordable Real Estate for Artists. Also, Kristen Segeda, Deputy Commissioner, is working on that. And one of the things that we're doing is spending city capital money to build out affordable space for rehearsal space and for individual artist studio spaces for all the different arts all over New York City. So when we've done these, we do public meeting after public meeting about the cultural life of New York City, and affordability comes out 100% of the time. And it's something that we are working on. The mayor committed to building 500 affordable studios and 1,500 live workspace for individual artists. And we're going to do it. We can't price artists and performers out of the city.
When we had before us the proposal to change the formula on the contribution rate, we heard some testimony in opposition that the Theater Sub-District Fund had sort of met its purpose, and that it really didn't need or wouldn't be able to utilize additional funds in a meaningful way. And to some extent, we heard that from, not surprisingly, the theater owners who actually end up making the contribution. So I understand.
Yeah, so I mean,
but I
hear you,
just
yeah.
finished my question.
Okay, yeah.
Do you think there's first to the question of what the need is, but second, the issue of to what extent there's a meeting of the minds or a disagreement with traditional Broadway theater industry about how or the adequacy of these funds, and to what extent and how they're utilized?
So, I mean, first of all, just to address the need, I think Broadway and the for-profit theaters need the entire ecosystem to be healthy. Like I said before, a vast, majority actually, maybe not a vast majority, a significant chunk of the success of, plays like Hamilton. I don't know if Hamilton would have been, like when I heard about Hamilton, we all heard about Hamilton. It sounded like a joke, right? It's like, are you kidding, right? Even Barack Obama has said, this is funny to hear that there's an idea that there was going to be a musical about the first Secretary of the Treasury, right? So, but that's not something, so, that's something that could be developed in a situation, in an environment that was not a for-profit environment where you say, this is an interesting idea by an interesting artist, who, by the way, has had success prior to that in Broadway. So the idea that there can be this R&D, that you can test stuff and there can be failures, and it's not actually such a big problem at the Public Theater if you don't sell all of the tickets and it doesn't have a long run. I mean, it's experimental. So the health of those for-profits depends on the other sector. Look, the need, I'm out and about all the time these days. We've had 115 meetings. I've been to about 40 or 50 of them. There's tremendous need. There is stress on the theater community across, there are small theaters that are under distress. The fact that the top of the pyramid is doing so well is based on that, the great work that's being done at the bottom of the pyramid, let's say economically. So I think that the need is there, and again, that idea, yeah, we had a great year last year. Years go up and down a little bit based on the incredible talent and how tourism is doing, et cetera. But Microsoft, when they became a big corporation, didn't say, let's stop changing or let's stop investing. We have to continue to invest in the entire theater community. We have to invest in the audiences. We have to get those kids to those subsidized performances so they're inspired. So I feel strongly that the need is there, that we are looking for ways. By the way, another program that started in 1982 was the Percent for Art program. Mm-hmm. Legislation was just passed at committee yesterday. It's going to go to vote today, which is going to modernize the Percent for Art program. There was an amount of money, which is $1.5 million a year, and it's like, that was $1982. We've gotten less and less and less money per year for Percent for Art. It's not the original intent of the legislation. So the new legislation is going to take that $1.5 million cap and put it up to $4 million, because that really, it's inflation, not just inflation, but that's how much it costs to build, that's how much more it costs to build a reasonably sized public art project. So I mean, I think it's time to consider. The need is there, and sort of this modernization of a law is happening elsewhere, and I think the city recognizes that, and I think it would be great to do that in the theater sub-district. I can guarantee you the money will be spent, and it'll be spent on incredible programming that'll enrich the entire theater community.
Do you have a sense that with hopefully a broader funding or deeper funding stream, that you will, what new frontiers, new ideas you will be, the theater district?
Yeah, so I think
will be looking at?
I think audience development is a key. And one of the things we've been thinking about for future rounds, again, is that, look, I go to Broadway, and I go to, and by the way, when you say Broadway, it does include roundabout, nonprofit Broadway, for-profit Broadway, et cetera. I think that the audiences are great. The majority of the audiences are not New Yorkers. What about the 8.5 million people we have here? And infusing more New Yorkers into those audiences at early ages, I think, is extremely important. I think also that some of the cracks on these smaller theaters that we're seeing in terms of the affordability is something we would like to look at it possibly in future rounds. So stuff that relates directly to the, what's happening, who's sitting in the seats right in the theater sub-district, and also just to look at areas, the problematic areas. By the way, I also don't think that one round of funding for diversity is going to solve the problems. I think there might be more work to be done there as well.
Daryl, and
You,
then Anna.
you had touched on Theater for a New Audience and its work with the African Art and
Mokata,
Diaspora,
yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
museum.
Museum of Contemporary African Diaspora and
Yes,
Art.
and they came and
And-
spoke before us, and they were really terrific, and I think we all learned a lot from the director and the associate director.
Yep.
Could you just tell us what the program was that you did?
So the program, it's also brick. So what's interesting about that, so it's like the others. It is it's a professional development program to get people into, a more diverse group of people into the theater sector. So what's interesting about that also is that it's a kind of coalition building with downtown Brooklyn spaces that brings three groups together that don't necessarily always communicate that strongly. So that I think it's going to end up with audience sharing, with sort of capacity building for the organizations themselves. There's something more involved in it just than the value to the young people who are going to get the paid apprenticeship program. But the idea there also is that, obviously you have a museum, a multimedia organization, and a theater working together. So the training will be across different sectors. And by the way, Mokata also does performance, et cetera. Oh, and Mark Morris is part of this as well, yes. Thank you very much. So you have dance, theater, multimedia, and a museum. So that kind of multifaceted training and seeing how these different organizations, which are, by the way, at quite different scales, work, I think is going to be incredibly valuable, both for the organizations themselves and the young people involved in the training.
Anna?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the train of thought with your comments before Cheryl's question, and that is looking ahead to future rounds.
Mhm.
Sounds like that's something you've clearly been thinking about.
Yes.
The fund has been on a cycle of making grants having this cycle every 2 or 3
Couple of
years.
years, yeah.
So I guess having just announced grants,
Yeah.
there's a bit of a pause. But I'm curious about how much is left in the fund. I don't know if we know about deals in the pipeline and can make any forecast about future contributions to the fund, and what your thoughts are about when you ramp up again
Yeah.
for the next round of grants.
Okay, so is it a little under, how much is left right now? It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not millions. About $1 million. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it should be a little bit north of it, somewhere between 1 and 2 million, at least.
It's over
from
$1
the-
million. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I would say that this depends on the mayor getting reelected and me being commissioner. So
Well, the specifics, but let's hope in general that
yeah.
this
No,
project
of course, and
continues.
the staff will
Yeah,
remain.
It's institutionalized.
So
Yeah,
I
Barbara will be there.
yes, she will. She's been here for several mayors, and we'll keep her. She's doing a great job. Some of the things I mentioned before. So the thing is that I would say that the final decision about what would happen in subsequent years would be based on the findings of the cultural plan, specifically related to the theater community and specifically related to the theater sub-district. So we are spending a lot of our time out and about trying to listen to people and what the real needs are in New York City. So again, I think audience development could be a major goal of a subsequent. I do think, again, since we keep hearing over and over again this question of affordability, what about, this round of grants was for everything except who's on stage, right? This wasn't about actors, this was about the jobs in the company, and so that's extremely important. But there are, difficulties for performers also, that to address those issues, I think would be extremely important. But I would say I would reserve judgment about the future rounds, even though the things we're playing around with, until we have the findings of the cultural plan.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Rich?
Thank you. Sorry I was running late this morning. Just in terms of the grants you're doing and the work you're doing, are there opportunities or have there been opportunities to leverage what you're doing with that of other organizations, either supporting what they're doing or jointly funding initiatives?
So we haven't done it as a match, but what happens, and I was just saying that downtown Brooklyn partnership between Mokata, Mark Morris, Stefana, and Brick did get state council funding and New York Community Trust funding. So actually 3 grants have now fully funded the operations of that professional development program. So absolutely, these kind of grants often can be and are sparks for additional funding. We haven't done it as a challenge grant in the past, is that correct?
We did it as a soft challenge.
A soft challenge. So there's a difference between a soft challenge and a hard challenge. A hard challenge would be you don't get the money unless you match it. A soft challenge is we encourage you. And by the way, that can be quite effective as well.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, those, taking advantage of those type of opportunities, you know, obviously your dollars will go further,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot more people get served. So obviously, if the opportunities present themselves, and if you can make those things happen, it'd be great.
Yes.
Michelle?
So, you know, the issue of cost for artists, and in general, how the relationship between culture, arts, and change in a neighborhood has obviously come up a lot.
Yep.
And comes up a lot, I think, for us in the role that we
Yep.
play, and it certainly came up in the East New York rezoning. What's been your department's role in the rezoning conversations, because it's so critical?
The off-topic question, right?
Yeah,
No,
we're
it's good.
connected.
No, believe me, we hear about it all the time. So I'd say that one of the major ways we've gotten involved is something called Building Community Capacity, which is happening in 4 communities. Have you guys heard about this? This is new. Okay, so Building Community Capacity is a program that's up in Washington Heights, the South Bronx, East New York, and Jamaica. So rezoning communities. The idea is that in those parts of town, we've worked with the cultural groups and you're familiar with this? Okay. So Hope can tell you what's going on in Jamaica. The idea is to help build community coalitions in preparation in a way for rezoning in the cultural community. So there's professional development aspect of it. We have staff members at our agency working on it, but each of the groups gets to hire their own coordinator within the community. So it's that idea of sort of real community buy-in. I hope you're nodding affirmatively, more or less. I know Jamaica has been a little bit, we can talk further about Jamaica. No, but I mean, there's community rifts often or issues that make these things quite difficult. But nonetheless, the idea is go to rezoning communities, try to enforce or reinforce the validity and vibrancy of the arts community that's already there, right? So this have to the idea of thriving in place, not that, you know, the next wave of artists like moving in, you know, so what happened in Williamsburg was the artists got displaced and they moved to Bushwick, and then, you know, what happens to Bushwick and what happens to the artists that are already in Bushwick at that moment, and then folks are moved up into, you know, across the border into Queens. That process, if we can say, and this relates to also the, you know, building affordable studio spaces, can reinforce the ability for artists to thrive in place, essentially. That's what we're thinking a lot about. It's a big issue that comes up all the time.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I just, along the same lines, and I think we certainly recognize, I speak for the department, but probably my colleagues here, I'm sure feel the same, that the part of a neighborhood's vibrancy, obviously, is the cultural, critical part is the cultural life of that community. And as we consider, I always hesitate to call them rezonings because they're really more, our view, neighborhood plans and doing things on a broader scale, as in East New York and as some of the others that are coming up. For the department, at least, culture and support for the cultural life of the existing community, and to, in a sense, it's almost a preservation strategy, but a cultural preservation strategy to encourage and support the existing cultural life of a community. And speaking for the departments, we look forward to working with cultural affairs on that in all the areas that neighborhoods that we're
That's, yeah,
engaged in. And so,
thank you. And I wanted to bring up one other thing related to that, which is that the whole question of sort of thriving communities in relationship to the arts has been, I think we all sort of get it at a gut level, but there has never been until now a comprehensive study of New York City in terms of cultural vibrancy in relationship to sort of hard facts on the ground. So there's a group at the University of Pennsylvania called the Social Impact of the Arts Project. They've been working mostly in Philadelphia for a couple of decades, looking at the correlation between thriving communities and artistic and cultural participation. So they've come to New York, and they've done a study which is about to be released, hopefully in the next 3 or 4 weeks, which looks, and I've seen preliminary findings, and I don't want to say what the findings are because we're all on the record and this is being recorded. We're waiting for that. But I'll tell you what happened in Philadelphia, and I'll tell you it's going to be quite similar, probably in New York City, which is to say that communities that are rich in arts and cultural participation are healthier communities. Kids are more likely to go to school, and crime is lower. That it's not necessarily, you can't say, oh, just bring in some arts, and the crime rate's going to go down. There's a causation question. It could be that, and these are, controlling for income and everything else. There's a correlation between cultural participation and, even things like lower diabetes and lower major crime. So then we're going to have a tool once this is delivered. And by the way, this is privately funded at arm's length from the city. We didn't hire them. They've been hired by foundations, paid for. So it's not something where it's like, okay, it's our study. So there might be stuff in the study that we agree with or don't agree with. But it's overall, I think, quite exciting we'll have that tool to be able to make the argument, not just the economic argument, but the social argument for the value of arts and culture in communities.
thank you.
Okay.
And thank you very much for coming, Tom. I'll just conclude by saying that I think we recognize that the role of cultural life in each individual, each community is so critical for all the reasons that you said and that we have seen separately. But also just to note that I think what we also know is that the strength of the world-class culture that we have in New York is due to the ecosystem that you described, which is the deep, deep, deep relationship between our world-class institutions and the cultural ground-up activity that we see, not just in the performing arts, but in the visual arts as well. So, thank you very much.
Great.
And I will call this review session to a conclusion, and we will start our formal public hearing in a minute. Thank you very much.
Thanks.